The breaking point. The archives of New Terran history, dated 2457 CE, begin with a simple statement. When humanity walked away, the stars held their breath. It had been just over 2 centuries since Earth made first contact with the Galactic Confederation, a sprawling alliance of 37 spacefaring civilizations spread across this arm of the Milky Way. The Confederation presented itself as the pinnacle of enlightened cooperation, a beacon of progress and stability. To a young spacefaring race like humanity, the promise of advanced technology and protection from the dangers lurking between stars was irresistible. Admiral Helena Chen remembered the day the Confederation envoys arrived at Luna Station. She had been a junior lieutenant then, standing at attention as the alien diplomats glided into the Grand Hall with their translators and bodyguards. The Navaki, with their crystalline bodies that refracted light in hypnotic patterns, the ponderous Mythlar whose massive forms seemed too heavy for Earth's gravity, and the Zith, those unnerving insectoids whose compound eyes missed nothing. "We welcome Earth to the greater community," the Navaki ambassador had said, voice like chimes in a gentle breeze. "Your potential is noteworthy." That single word, noteworthy, would haunt humanity for generations. "Admiral, they're here," said Commander Reeves, interrupting Chen's memories. She straightened her uniform and nodded. The Confederation Oversight Committee had arrived for their annual inspection of Earth's military capabilities, technological developments, and colonial expansion efforts. "Let's get this over with," she muttered. The committee consisted of 5 representatives, one from each of the Confederation's ruling species. They filed into the conference room with the practiced neutrality of bureaucrats everywhere, but Chen had learned to read their subtle tells over the years. The slight vibration of the Zith's antennae, the purplish tinge around the Navaki's edges. They were displeased about something. Ambassador Tolvan, the Mythlar representative, settled his massive bulk into the reinforced chair specifically designed for his species. "Admiral Chen, we've reviewed your latest colonial reports. It seems humanity has established outposts beyond the approved boundaries in the Ta CD system." And there it was, the latest in a long series of reprimands. "The outposts are scientific in nature, Ambassador," Chen replied evenly. "The treaty allows for research stations. Research stations with defensive capabilities equivalent to military installations," interjected Zith Ambassador Kix, mandibles clicking in disapproval. "This violates Statute 27B of the Confederation Charter regarding developing species." Chen had to force herself not to clench her fists. Humanity had been a developing species for nearly 2 centuries now. No matter the advances made, the assessments always concluded the same way: not yet ready for full membership. Meanwhile, restrictions on human expansion, military development, and technological research grew tighter each year. "We will review our compliance with the statutes," Chen said diplomatically. She knew the drill. Make concessions, show contrition, then find creative ways to work around the restrictions once they left. The meeting dragged on for hours, ending with the usual list of recommendations that were, in reality, thinly veiled demands. The Confederation representatives departed with promises to return in 6 months for a special review, sooner than the standard annual inspection. When they were finally gone, Chen met with the rest of Earth's Leadership Council in a secure room deep beneath the New Geneva headquarters. President Amara Okafor's hologram flickered into existence, joining from the Mars colony where she was touring the latest greenhouse developments. "How bad was it?" Okafor asked without preamble. "Worse than usual," Chen replied. "They're particularly concerned about the quantum entanglement drive. Someone leaked information." Dr. Elias Wong, head of the Unified Science Division, winced. "The QE drive is our most closely guarded project. If they've discovered it, they haven't seen the full picture," interrupted Director Sanjay Mehta of Earth Intelligence. "They know we're working on a new propulsion system, but not what it can do. Still, they're spooked enough to schedule another inspection in 6 months rather than the usual year." President Okafor's hologram leaned forward, her expression grave. Then we have 6 months to make a decision. Do we comply with their latest demands and abandon the QE drive research, or do we accelerate Project Exodus? And if the Confederation realizes what we're doing? Asked General Torres, the final member of the Council. They won't, Meta said with cold confidence. Not until it's too late. The next 4 months passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of deception and preparation. On the surface, humanity appeared to be complying with Confederation directives, even dismantling some of the Tau Ceti outposts as demanded. Beneath this facade of compliance, Project Exodus accelerated to its culmination. The quantum entanglement drive represented a revolutionary approach to space travel. Unlike conventional faster-than-light systems that required established jump points monitored by the Confederation, the QE drive created temporary wormholes based on quantum principles the alien civilizations had never explored. It was humanity's secret advantage, developed painstakingly over decades without alerting their overseers. 2 weeks before the Confederation's special inspection was due, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital command station, watching the planet that had been humanity's cradle for millions of years. Soon, it would appear abandoned, a husk left behind as a statement. Commander Reeves joined her at the viewport. Final population transfers are complete, Admiral. The last civilian transports departed under stealth protocols an hour ago. What about the environmental systems? Operating as programmed. Earth will remain habitable, just vacant. The automated systems will maintain the biosphere indefinitely. Chen nodded. That had been an important aspect of the plan. They weren't destroying their homeworld, merely leaving it behind. A silent statement to the Confederation. You can have the planet, but you can't have us. And the message. Set to activate when the inspection team arrives. It will broadcast simultaneously to all Confederation channels and facilities. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Begin final sequence. Across the solar system, on colonies from Mars to the moons of Saturn, humanity completed its preparations in perfect synchronization. Massive colony ships, hidden for decades in classified shipyards, emerged from their concealment. The military fleet, quietly retrofitted with QE drives, moved into escort positions. Smaller vessels gathered the last of Earth's cultural treasures, wildlife samples, and ecological specimens not already evacuated. Through careful planning and countless small movements disguised as routine activities, humanity had managed to extract itself from its homeworld without raising immediate alarms. The few aliens stationed on Earth and throughout the solar system had been carefully managed. Some politely detained until departure, others fed misinformation that would buy crucial time. On the final day, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Horizon, overlooking Earth one last time. The blue marble hung serenely against the black backdrop of space, clouds swirling over oceans and continents. Beautiful, peaceful, and now empty of human life. QE drive systems online, reported the navigation officer. All vessels report ready for transition. Chen opened a channel to the entire fleet, thousands of ships carrying nearly 11 billion humans to a destination known only to the highest levels of leadership. This is Admiral Chen to all ships. For 2 centuries, we have endured constraints on our potential. We have watched species who joined the Confederation after us receive full membership while we remained classified as developing. We have complied with increasingly restrictive mandates while receiving diminishing benefits. Today, humanity chooses a different path. We leave behind the world that birthed us, but we carry its spirit to the stars. The Confederation wanted Earth. They can have it. An empty planet with its cities intact, its ecosystems functioning, but devoid of the species they sought to control. Initiate quantum entanglement transition on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Throughout the solar system, thousands of ships vanished simultaneously in flashes of blue-white light as their QE drives activated. Within moments, the human presence in the system was reduced to automated systems and maintenance pods programmed to keep Earth's biosphere stable. 3 days later, when the Confederation inspection team arrived, they found a solar system devoid of human life. Cities stood empty. Orbital stations drifted unmanned. The only greeting was an automated message broadcast on all frequencies to the Galactic Confederation. For 2 centuries, humanity accepted its place in your hierarchy. We contributed technologies, resources, and lives to your collective security. In return, we received constant oversight and restrictions. Today, we have chosen independence. Earth remains as we found it, a gift to the Confederation that never truly welcomed us as equals, to not attempt to follow. In the Confederation Grand Council chamber, the message played before representatives of 37 species. Silence followed, then a growing murmur of disbelief and concern. The humans had simply left. 11 billion people had disappeared overnight, taking with them technologies and capabilities the Confederation had never fully understood. Find them, ordered the High Chancellor finally. Whatever it takes, find them and bring them back. But the galaxy is vast, and humans had learned well the art of disappearance. The void they left. The immense conference hall of the Confederation's Central Authority on Navaki Prime buzzed with anxiety. Representatives from all 37 member species had been summoned for an emergency session, the 3rd such gathering in the 6 months since humanity's unprecedented disappearance. High Chancellor Vortel, the eldest of the Navaki, hovered at the central podium, her crystalline form pulsing with stressed indigo light. "Order," she commanded, her harmonic voice cutting through the cacophony of translated conversations. "We must have order if we are to address this crisis." The assembly gradually quieted. Vortel's faceted eyes swept across the gathered delegates before she continued. 6 months have passed since the human exodus. Despite deploying our most advanced tracking methods and intelligence assets, we have found no trace of their new location. This gathering will assess the unforeseen consequences of their absence. On the massive display behind her, data streams illustrated the escalating problems facing the Confederation. Economic indicators flashed red across multiple sectors. Security alerts highlighted border incursions and pirate activity at levels not seen in centuries. Trade route disruptions pulsed as angry orange lines across star maps. The Economic Council will present its findings first, Vortel announced. Councillor Merltek of the Zith rose, mandibles clicking nervously as he interfaced with the presentation system. "The situation is worse than initially projected," he began, compound eyes reflecting the data displays. Human innovation drove 37% of Confederation technological advancement over the past century, despite their restricted status. Their absence has created critical gaps in our production and research capabilities. Graphs materialize showing production declines across multiple industries. They position themselves as essential contributors in seemingly minor, but ultimately critical sectors. Without them, production chains across 17 star systems are faltering. Predictive models suggest economic contraction of 23% within the next standard year if alternatives cannot be found. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Mythlar representative, Ambassador Dolvin, raised an enormous appendage. "Are we to understand that a single developing species integrated itself so thoroughly into our economic infrastructure that their departure threatens collapse? How was this permitted?" Merltek's antennae flattened in discomfort. The humans operated within approved parameters. They simply optimized their contributions in ways we failed to fully appreciate until now. Admiral Cathal of Confederation Security Forces took the podium next, her reptilian features set in a grim expression. "The security situation is equally concerning. Human forces comprised 41% of our rapid response capabilities along the outer rim. They maintained defensive positions against the swarm incursions in the Cygnus Arm and the Vrek's expansionist movements near the Sagittarius Gap." The display shifted to show a series of red indicators spreading across the galactic map. Within weeks of their departure, we recorded a 340% increase in border violations. The Vreks have already annexed 2 former Confederation outposts, and long-dormant swarm hives show signs of renewed activity. Surely we can redistribute forces to compensate, suggested the Belleran representative, his tentacles gesturing dismissively. Admiral Cathal bared her teeth in what the Assembly recognized as an expression of cynical amusement. With what resources? The humans maintained disproportionately large fleets by claiming defensive necessities, which we permitted because they served our greater security needs. They've taken those fleets with them. Our projections indicate we would need to triple military expenditures to match their former capabilities, expenditures we cannot afford given the current economic contraction. The presentations continued, each more alarming than the last. Agricultural systems faltering without human agronomists. Medical research stalled without human geneticists. 17 different trade routes now vulnerable without human patrol vessels. As the reports concluded, Chancellor Vortel's crystalline form had dimmed to a troubled gray hue. We now turn to intelligence services for an update on the search. Director Shivna, a shadow-dwelling umbral seldom seen at public gatherings, materialized at the podium. His form seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an unsettling void in the space he occupied. Our efforts to locate humanity continue without success, he stated, voice like dry leaves rustling. Their method of departure involved previously unknown propulsion technology that left no conventional warp signatures to track. We have deployed probe networks to scan 17,342 potential systems within range of suspected capabilities, all without result. How is this possible? Demanded the Tellarite ambassador. 11 billion beings cannot simply vanish. And yet, Shivna replied with eerie calm, they have done precisely that. We have, however, determined that this exodus was not spontaneous. Evidence from their abandoned habitats suggests preparation spanning decades, possibly generations. While maintaining the appearance of compliance with Confederation directives, they systematically developed the capacity to separate themselves entirely from our oversight. The revelation sent another wave of disturbed murmurs through the assembly. Furthermore, Shivna continued, we have discovered that human representatives throughout the Confederation had been systematically collecting and archiving specific technological and scientific data for years, information that would allow them to function independently of our shared infrastructure. The pattern suggests a coordinated intelligence operation of remarkable sophistication and patience. High Chancellor Vortel interrupted, her crystalline form now pulsing with agitated red light. Are you suggesting this was premeditated abandonment rather than a reactionary exodus? I am stating it as fact, Shivna replied. Based on recovered timeline data, humanity began preparing for this possibility approximately 53 standard years ago, shortly after their third application for full membership was denied. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations and accusations. Vortel was forced to emit a harmonic pulse that caused momentary discomfort to quiet the assembly. We must focus on solutions, not recriminations, she insisted. Ambassador Exile of the Foros, a species known for philosophical insight, rose slowly from his seat. Perhaps we should consider why they left, not merely how to find them. The humans were classified as developing for 2 centuries despite demonstrable advancement. They petitioned for full membership 17 times, each denied for increasingly technical reasons. The regulations were clear, objected the representative from the ancient Drax hierarchy. Their psychological profiles indicated aggressive tendencies and resource consumption patterns that required oversight. And yet, Exile countered, we happily positioned them at our borders against the swarm and the Vrex, precisely because of those aggressive tendencies. We restricted their expansion while simultaneously depending on their military capabilities. We limited their technological development while quietly incorporating their innovations into our infrastructure. Perhaps the question is not why they left, but why they stayed as long as they did. An uncomfortable silence fell over the assembly. Admiral Cathal broke it with a harsh laugh. Philosophical debates won't secure our borders. The Vrex have already taken advantage of the security void to advance their territory. The latest intelligence suggests they plan major offensives in 3 sectors previously protected by human fleets. And the economic collapse in the Rigel sectors can't wait for soul-searching, added Councillor Merletic. Without the specialized components previously supplied by human manufacturers, critical infrastructure is already failing. Then we must find them, insisted Chancellor Vortelephone, not merely to bring them back under oversight, but to re-establish essential relationships. Director Shivna, what resources do you require to expand the search? The Umbral Intelligence Director seemed to grow even darker, if such a thing were possible. Chancellor, we have already committed extensive resources. I must suggest an uncomfortable possibility. The humans may have developed technology beyond our current tracking capabilities. Their propulsion method appears to operate on principles we have yet to understand. The implications of this statement stunned the assembly into silence again. The Confederation had existed for millennia. The idea that a developing species could create technology beyond the understanding of ancient races like the Navaki or the Drax was almost inconceivable. Almost. Ambassador Exile spoke again, his voice quiet but carrying throughout the chamber. We classified them as developing while simultaneously fearing their potential. Perhaps that contradiction has now resolved itself, to our detriment. In the months that followed, the situation deteriorated further. The Vrex Empire, sensing weakness, launched coordinated offensives across 3 sectors. The Swarm, dormant for generations, began expanding aggressively from the Cygnus Arm. Within Confederation territory, economic systems strained to breaking point as production chains collapsed without human contributions. More concerning were the emerging faction conflicts. For centuries, the Confederation had maintained a delicate balance of power among its member species, with humans often serving as convenient neutral intermediaries in disputes. Without them, ancient rivalries and territorial ambitions resurfaced. The Zith and Belleran trade dispute escalated to military posturing. The Drex and Navaki disagreement over colonial rights in the Pleiades cluster resulted in the first direct confrontation between member species in over 400 years. 1 year after humanity's departure, Director Shivnar requested a private audience with High Chancellor Vortelephone in her crystalline chamber deep within Navaki Prime. The Chancellor received the shadowy intelligence director with evident apprehension. "You have news?" she asked. "Of a sort," Shivna replied. "We have eliminated 93% of potential destinations within predicted range of human capabilities. They are not in any of those systems." "Then where are they?" Vortel demanded, her crystalline form pulsing with frustration. "That," said Shivna, "is the concerning question. Either their technology allows for travel far beyond our current understanding, or," he paused, "or what? Or they were more advanced than we ever realized and deliberately masked their true capabilities during their entire association with the Confederation." Vortel's crystalline structure dimmed in distress. "Impossible. Our assessments were perhaps," Shivna interrupted, "exactly what they wanted us to see." As if to punctuate this disturbing possibility, an urgent communication chimed. Vortel accepted the transmission, and Admiral Kithel's reptilian visage appeared in holographic form. "Chancellor, the Vrex have broken through the Sagittarius defensive line. 3 Confederation worlds are under direct assault. Our forces are overwhelmed and requesting immediate reinforcement. Deploy the reserve fleet from Sector 7, Vortel commanded. The reserves have already been committed to contain the swarm advance in the Cygnus Arm, Kthul replied grimly. There are no additional forces available. As the Chancellor absorbed this dire news, another transmission cut in, this one from the Economic Council. Chancellor, infrastructure failures have reached critical levels in 17 systems. Civil unrest is spreading as basic services collapse. For the first time in her long existence, Vortel felt something akin to panic. The Confederation, stable for millennia, was unraveling in just 1 year without a species they had dismissed as developing. How did we become so dependent on them without realizing it? She asked, not expecting an answer. Shivna's dark form seemed to ripple. Perhaps because we were too focused on controlling what we feared to recognize what we needed. The reality was becoming unavoidable. The Confederation faced threats it could not counter, economic collapse it could not prevent, and internal division it could not heal, all because they had driven away the very species they had sought to contain. Find them, Vortel said finally. Whatever the cost, whatever the concessions required. Find humanity. The Confederation's survival may depend on it. But the void humanity left behind continued to grow, and the stars they had vanished among kept their secret well. The return on their terms. 5 years after humanity's exodus, the Galactic Confederation stood on the brink of collapse. The Vrex Empire had captured 17 formerly Confederation worlds. The swarm had devoured the resources of an entire sector in the Cygnus Arm. Economic systems throughout Confederation space operated at barely 40% of pre-exodus levels. And perhaps most damaging of all, the unity that had defined the Confederation for millennia had fractured as member species increasingly pursued their own interests in the face of existential threats. On Navaki Prime, the Central Authority Chamber, once the proud heart of galactic governance, now stood half-empty, with many member representatives either unable to attend due to security concerns or simply unwilling to participate in what many saw as a failed institution. High Chancellor Vortel, her once brilliantly faceted crystalline form now dulled with stress and age, addressed the diminished assembly. The Vrex fleet has been detected approaching the Arcturus system. If it falls, they will have a direct path to 5 core worlds, including Zith Prime and Belara. Admiral Kithel, now bearing scars from a recent battle against swarm forces, displayed the tactical situation. Our defensive capabilities are stretched beyond sustainable limits. We cannot hold Arcturus without withdrawing protection from the Procyon system, which would leave it vulnerable to the swarm. An impossible choice, murmured Ambassador Exile of the Foras, sacrificing one core system to potentially save another. The grim assessment was interrupted by an urgent communication. Director Shivna's dark form materialized in the center of the chamber, causing a ripple of surprise. The enigmatic intelligence director rarely appeared at public gatherings, much less uninvited. Chancellor, council members, he began without preamble. Our long-range detection grid has identified an approaching fleet of unprecedented size entering Confederation space near the former human territory of Sol. The chamber erupted in alarm. The Vrex, demanded Cathal. A third front would be catastrophic. Not the Vrex, Shivna interrupted. The ships match no known configuration in our databases. They are utilizing a propulsion method we cannot identify. Their velocity exceeds our fastest vessels by at least an order of magnitude. Chancellor Vortel's crystalline structure pulsed with alarm. Another hostile species. Now, when we are at our weakest. Unknown, Shivna replied. However, they are transmitting on all standard frequencies. A single message, repeating. Let us hear it, Vortel commanded. The chamber's audio system crackled to life, and a voice, unmistakably human, filled the space. To the Galactic Confederation. After 5 years of independence, humanity extends greetings. We stand ready to discuss mutual cooperation between sovereign powers. Our representatives will arrive at Navaki Prime in 3 standard days. We suggest preparations for substantive negotiations. Silence gripped the chamber as the implications registered. The humans had returned, not as supplicants or subjects, but declaring themselves equals. Track them, ordered Kithal instinctively. We need to know where they've been hiding. Shivna's dark form seemed to absorb even more light than usual. Admiral, their method of travel leaves no traceable signature. Furthermore, preliminary scans indicate their vessels possess defensive capabilities that would render interception inadvisable. You mean we couldn't stop them if we tried? Ambassador Dolvin of the Mythlar interpreted bluntly. Correct, admitted Shivna. Chancellor Vortel vibrated with complex emotions that sent ripples of color through her crystalline form. 5 years ago, they'd vanished without a trace. Now they return, traveling faster than our best ships, with technology we cannot track or intercept. What have they become in their absence? No one had an answer. 3 days later, a single vessel appeared in orbit around Nevaki Prime, having somehow bypassed the entire planetary defense grid without triggering alarms. It wasn't until the ship requested landing clearance that Confederation authorities even became aware of its presence, a technological feat that sent shockwaves through military and intelligence circles. The human delegation that descended from the craft consisted of 5 individuals, led by a woman of distinguished appearance who introduced herself as Grand Administrator Helena Chen, representing the United Systems of Humanity. Chen, the same Admiral Chen who had overseen humanity's exodus 5 years earlier, now bore herself with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Her small delegation was escorted to the Central Authority Chamber, where the full Confederation Council awaited. As they entered, Chen surveyed the chamber with a hint of recognition. "It's been some time since I stood before this council," she remarked casually, "though I was wearing a different uniform then." Chancellor Vortel moved forward to formally receive the delegation. "Admiral, excuse me, Grand Administrator Chen. The Confederation acknowledges your return and your request for discussions." "Thank you, Chancellor. But before we begin formal negotiations, perhaps we should address the Vrex fleet approaching Arcturus and the swarm expansion in Procyon. Neither situation allows for diplomatic luxuries like extended preliminaries." Shocked murmurs ran through the council. How did the humans know about strategic situations that had only been discussed in closed sessions hours earlier? Chen smiled slightly at their reaction. "We've been watching, Chancellor. Just because we left doesn't mean we stopped paying attention to our former neighbors." Admiral Kfull stepped forward, scales bristling with suspicion. "Watching how? Our detection systems have found no evidence of human observation platforms or vessels within Confederation space." "That," Chen replied evenly, "is one of many technological advances we've made since declaring our independence. But discussing our surveillance capabilities isn't why we're here. You face imminent threats on 2 fronts that you cannot counter with available resources. We're prepared to offer assistance, under specific conditions." Chancellor Vortel's crystalline form pulsed with cautious hope. "What conditions?" Chen gestured, and one of her delegation activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. A 3-dimensional map of the galaxy materialized, with certain regions highlighted in blue. "These areas represent current human territory. We've established 17 major colonies and numerous outposts across these regions during the past 5 years. Our first condition is simple: formal recognition of the United Systems of Humanity as a sovereign power with exclusive jurisdiction over these territories." The Council studied the map with astonishment. The blue regions extended far beyond what any had imagined possible in such a short time, spanning areas that the Confederation had deemed uninhabitable or unreachable. "How is this possible?" asked Ambassador Exile. "Some of these systems are thousands of light-years apart. Even with your departure technology, establishing viable colonies across such distances in 5 years should be impossible. The quantum entanglement drive was only our first breakthrough," Chen explained. "Once freed from Confederation restrictions, our development accelerated exponentially. What you're seeing represents not just territorial expansion, but a fundamental reimagining of what's possible." Chancellor Vortel steadied herself. "Your first condition is noted. Continue." "Second," Chen proceeded, "we require a complete restructuring of Confederation human relations. No more developing species classification. No oversight committees. No restrictions on our technological or military development. Any future relationship must be based on mutual respect between equals." "And in exchange for these concessions?" Kfull asked tersely. Chen's expression hardened slightly. "In exchange, Admiral, we prevent the collapse of the Confederation and the subjugation of your member worlds. Our fleet can deploy immediately to counter both the Vrex and Swarm advances. Additionally, we can provide technological solutions to address the infrastructure failures plaguing your core systems. The terms hung in the air, both rescue and humiliation for the once dominant Confederation. They needed humanity's help, and both sides knew it. "May I ask," Chancellor Vortel said carefully, "why you've chosen to return at all? You clearly no longer need the Confederation. You've proven capable of thriving independently. Why not simply let us face these challenges alone?" Chen's expression softened slightly. "A fair question. The simple answer is this: despite everything, we still believe in the potential of cooperative galactic civilization, just not one based on hierarchy and control." She stepped closer to the Chancellor, her voice low but carrying throughout the chamber. 5 years ago, we left because we had no choice but to find our own path. Today, we return because we believe there's a better path forward for all species, but it must be built on mutual respect, not subordination. The negotiations that followed lasted for weeks, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Confederation needed humanity's help, and humanity was offering it, albeit on terms that fundamentally rewrote the balance of power. True to their word, human fleets deployed to both the Arcturus and Procyon fronts within days of the initial agreement. Utilizing technologies that shocked even veteran Confederation observers, they rapidly contained both the Vrex and Swarm advances. Human engineers brought equally revolutionary solutions to the infrastructure crisis plaguing Confederation worlds. 6 months after humanity's return, a formal treaty was signed establishing the new relationship between the United Systems of Humanity and the Galactic Confederation. No longer a member species, humanity instead became an allied sovereign power, the first such designation in Confederation history. As the ceremonial signing concluded, Chancellor Vortel and Grand Administrator Chen stepped aside for a private conversation. "I must admit," Vortel said, her crystalline form glowing with a mixture of relief and lingering concern, "when you departed 5 years ago, many believed you were committing your species to isolation and eventual decline. Clearly, we underestimated humanity yet again." Chen smiled. "The Confederation saw us as a problem to be managed. We saw ourselves as a potential waiting to be realized. That fundamental difference in perspective defined our relationship from the beginning. And now," asked Vortelephone, "what does humanity want from this new arrangement? You've achieved independence, demonstrated superior technology, secured recognition. What more do you seek?" Chen looked out through the vast windows of the chamber to the glittering capital of Naveki Prime. "The same thing we've always wanted, Chancellor, the opportunity to explore our full potential without artificial constraints, and perhaps to help create a galactic community where no species faces the limitations we once did. You've certainly demonstrated what can happen when those constraints are removed," Vortel acknowledged, "though some in the Council still fear where humanity's unchecked development might lead. Fear has been the Confederation's response to humanity from the beginning," Chen replied. "Perhaps it's time to try curiosity instead." In the years that followed, the relationship between humanity and the Confederation evolved into something neither side could have predicted. The rigid hierarchical structure that had defined the Confederation for millennia gradually gave way to a more flexible alliance of sovereign powers, inspired by the human model but adapted for the diverse needs of